This is the Almost Daily Zencast. Hello, and namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Hello and namaste. Thank you for tuning in. I am your ever absurd and ever so slightly wacky ass host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Ideological outrage is all the trend today. Ideological outrage is just raging wildly popular. Ideological outrage seems to drive our social media. Ideological outrage seems to drive our news media. Ideological outrage seems to drive our day-to-day thoughts and aspirations. People seem to aspire to ideological outrage. People appear to be enjoying the ideological outrage. Now, a good shout is all well and good. Letting out our pent-up negative emotions has its proper time and place. But perpetual, never-ending, seemingly intractable and unsolvable, endless ideological outrage is as toxic as any of the other highly toxic habits we humans seem to have a predilection towards. Ideological... edit that out. Blah, 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 blah. I once again got very excited about jumping right into the episode and did not do my professional theatrical vocal warm-ups. So if I'm a little tongue-twisted, if I can't say red leather, yellow leather 18 times really fast today during the show, I apologize. Ideological outrage. What is it? And, by contrast, what do I mean by transformative healing? What am I pointing to with these two opposites? And how do I resolve the fact that I'm calling out these two opposites and often like to harp about duality and non-duality coexisting? And that's today's thematic push. First things first. How many days out of the week do you find yourself exasperated, either with the events at large or specific individual interactions that you are encountering with your social media circles? Your so-called social media friends. It is adorable that we've created this virtual space for friendship, and that the number one thing this virtual space seems to foster is blind, toxic, vehement, and virulent ideological outrage amongst friends. Let's pause for a moment and zoom back and zoom out and look at the big, big, big picture. First, I'd like to point out that it is always true that things are never as horrible as they might seem to be under the worst case scenario perspective. Things should never be written off as honky-dory and peachy keen, because that's putting on the rose-colored glasses if you're just thoughtlessly assuming that everything is the best that it possibly can be. Only Gillette assumes that, and look at the mess they've got themselves into. Sorry, that was a cheap joke. I haven't addressed the Gillette situation at all in any of my social media posts or on this podcast, because akin to the clusterfuck of crazy surrounding the MAGA hat versus healing drum issue or moment or phenomena. Phenomena. I can't help myself. I mean, that's always fun. You're in a room full of actual people, but I really can't help myself. Whenever anybody says phenomena, like, what an amazing phenomena. In my head, it just starts playing, even when I say it. That's why I like phenom. It doesn't quite get there. It doesn't quite trigger the Muppets music video in my head. I digress. I wish I had that queued up, because that original track is pretty cool. Maybe I'll dig it up while I'm rambling at you, and we can play it for the end of the show. As if I can type and talk at the same time, right? I can't. It's like typing or not typing. Okay, I found the track. It's instantly available on the YouTubes. By the way, for those who are new to the show, all copyright infringement is, and I have to say this according to my legal department, all copyright infringement is respectfully not intentional. All things referenced within my podcast show are referenced as they are for the truly altruistic purposes of spiritual enlightenment, edutainment. I don't think that what I'm doing is going to cause you to be enlightened. Don't get me wrong. I just think that there is a genre of edutainment, information-rich, educational entertainment. That's what my friend coined it, edutainment. I once worked, to go on a random and totally very personal real-life sidebar, legit reels, for realsies. In my youth, while I was looking for fun, interesting, not sitting at a desk kind of jobs, I fell in with this after-school edutainment company. I think it was called Mad Science. It was a franchise, part of a I think it was originally a Canadian company, but I don't know the details there. But it was a franchise company that provides simple, fun, entertaining, and educational science-y content that was just as suitable for birthday parties as it was for after-school, day. What do you call? What are those programs called? Where you stay after school, so you're not like out on the streets, that kind of stuff. There's an education industry name for that sort of program, and I forget what it is, and I apologize. I am smarter than I sound sometimes, folks. I'm just of a certain variety of absent-minded professor type that sometimes the words I know just won't come out of my mouth right in the moment I'm trying to say them. But I digress. Spinning back full circle. There is a great divide in this country. And I'm not talking about the obvious one. I'm not talking about MAGA, no MAGA, okay? That's an obvious and silly divide, which isn't new. MAGA, no MAGA is just the same as Obamacare, no Obamacare. Like, if you're going to pick a random issue to be the flagship issue that divides the country. And, oh, by the way, for those who still don't remember or never realized or never came across this information, Obamacare was originally developed in a Republican conservative think tank in its entirety, and was originally Mitt Romney care. Mitt Romney, before his national level debut at politics and presidential politics, had in his much less glamorously famous period of political activity in his home state that I believe he was governor or something, right? I never claimed to have all the facts memorized, folks. I just prefer facts over wild speculation. But in his early days, he and the Heritage Foundation, that I'm fairly certain I've got right, they together created a mandate-driven, baby step towards free health care for all, ideologically, at the time, it was sort of nonpartisan. It wasn't about Republicans versus Democrats when they first, it's at least not in the hyper-partisan way that we see at the federal level. And that got the attention of Democratic congresspersons, including the future President Obama. Blah, 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 blah. That was an interesting sidebar. Let's roll it back. Let's not lose control of the episode. It's been 12 minutes, and I've only just introduced the theme and then gone on crazy tangents. That's me, though, folks. This is me being me. If we were having a real-life conversation, my half of it would be like this. Except that I'm also very good at listening and responding to what others say. Let's put a pin in all the floating points and zoom in on that. I just claimed to be very good at listening to what other people say. Now, whether or not I actually am, let's set that question aside for a hot second. Because as of right now, I don't have many examples of me interviewing others for the podcast. Although, if you're new to the show, be sure to check out the 2 Alan Arkin episodes. Mr. Arkin is someone I look up to, a theater professional, both in film and stage, whose work I admire, and comes from a family of talented actors, and blah, 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 for those of you who are theater nerds, and for those of you who want to hear someone else's voice besides my own, check out those 2 episodes. And if you are in my social media circles and you have something to say on any of the subjects that I like to dance around, by all means, get in touch with me, because I'm looking for people from all perspectives, from all points of view. Whether you agree with my central thesis behind the momentum of this podcast, or including if you disagree and you're capable of having a reasonable, respectful, non-knee-jerk playground bullying, spit in your face, and spew hate speech that makes no sense at you kind of person, you can actually manage a thoughtful discussion that lays out your points, please contact me, because I would love to have a forum of contributors and collaborators from all points of view. Because it's not about being right, folks. It's about building organic and genuine consensus. I propose that idea to you. In my humble opinion, that's one of the big central places where we have gone astray. If we assume the most innocent explanation for the conditions we find ourselves in, then we as human beings have just strayed a bit from our preferred ideals. Now, that's presuming the most innocent possible of explanations. Now, there's all sorts of shades of gray between that and the all conspiracies are true, everyone's out to kill us, nothing is real, don't believe anyone else except for the sources that I'm quoting from. Oh, we're so fucked. The world's gonna end. Like, nexus of darkness over here in the extreme alt other side, where all of the really hardcore conspiracy blind faithers hang out. Now, that wasn't a wild and thoughtless jab at conspiracy theorists. I myself cannot help but be categorized as a conspiracy theorist because I do indeed have theories, and they are attempts at explaining our world, and some of those theories include the acknowledgement that there must indeed be occult cabals. Now, I don't mean necessarily Satan-worshipping cults, right? Like, the word occult means hidden or secret, and cabal means an organized group or club, and I'm sure there's deeper nuances there in both those definitions, but I just wanted to point out that I wasn't pushing to any particular extreme with that. So I digress. Let us return to the central theme here. We look around our society today. We look around our social media platforms. We take a good hard look at the broad strokes of what's going on. And here's what I see. And tell me if you don't see it also. But slowly but surely, over the past 30, 40, 50 years, the fundamental assumptions about our society have been undermined, and not just undermined, but sort of flipped on their heads, and turned inside out, right? The previously seemingly appropriate political ideological infrastructure, if I can coin that phrase, at first all seemed to be working towards a common good, despite a bit of partisanship and antagonistic political practices, such is the way of politics. At least we're not slitting each other's throats, right? And yet, today, right now, in 2019, one does not need to look very hard or very far away to see or encounter or get sucked into and become involved with mindless, thoughtless, virulently hate-filled, radically absolutist, and sort of absurdly meaningless discussions that quickly devolve into pathetic name-calling and hate speech spewing. Now, I'm not here to say that it's any one individual's fault. It's not any one particular ideological echo chamber or its base's fault, right? What I am saying is that we are encountering this not by accident, but by design. The echo chambers aren't broken, friends. They're working exactly as intended. The political system isn't a disaster. This is what it was designed to do. It's just being pushed to new extremes in all directions. Ideological outrage is not an unfortunate byproduct of this moment in history. Ideological outrage is not a natural reaction to the clusterfuck that is everybody else's insanity, ideological outrage is the preferred, targeted outcome of this system built on echo chambers and imaginary ideological boundaries designed to cause conflict, designed to split us apart, to fracture our society into ever increasingly intractable, unmovable, unresolvable divisions that keep splintering up into smaller and smaller factions of counterfactions. I often ask people in the midst of some comment discussion or comment thread on social media that's getting hot or heated up and starting to clearly bring out those comments that are just, meaningless insults. I like to interrupt that flow and be like, isn't it fascinating how people who claim to be trying to solve a problem or trying to prove a point that by proving it would in theory then solve a problem, isn't it fascinating how quickly and how easily and how blindly and how almost thoughtlessly they can devolve into pointless name-calling. Nameless point-calling? That wouldn't have made sense. But pointless name-calling. Now, some of the time, those are, professional trolls. And it's, tragically, probably happening more often than any of us care to admit in our own private social media circles. Private. What's private on the internet? But you know what I mean to indicate that. It's like there are lots of people on social media that are not trying to be internationally famous on social media. And thus, I think they sort of assume that the friends they collect on their social media circles are all of a certain kind. And they often, aren't exclusively just real people that genuinely agree with them. And even if they are, that whole pesky 6 degrees of separation from anything else in the world thing kind of brings you right up close to all the bad players if you've got enough friends and connections in the social media. So whenever I ask that question at these comments, it's interesting. The waters seem to part. Those who are either themselves trolls or have been trolled so hard they are now trolling, they've been brainwashed so efficiently, they're now out there spewing talking points that they themselves really can't back up or really don't comprehend at a deep level. And these folks try to claim to be making a winning argument. A winning intellectual argument is always a tricky word because there's the act of argumentation, right, that is fighting, and then there's the intellectual pursuit. Well, I guess I should flip those words. There's the intellectual pursuit of argumentation, like being in debate class, here to present a sound argument in support of X, Y, and Z. And then there's the meaningless act of arguing, and it's the same word, and it gets confusing. I need to pick a better word for one or the other so that I can disambiguate my point. But when we're presenting our thesis, right, we can either truly, genuinely hear each other out and think each other's points through, and as we should recognize we're all in this together, we should build towards common ground and consensus building, not judgment, 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 and rejection of all that which does not meet our judgment criteria, and vice versa. Because if all you're doing is judging, we're not really discovering new concepts. We're not really investing in new theories. We're not really discovering new solutions, are we? We're just saying yes or no and drawing boundaries if all we're doing is judging. I did an episode a while back about the difference between judgment and discernment. If you haven't heard it yet, I humbly invite you to go track it down. Just scroll. It should be down there. If it's not, it's because I've taken it off to edit it and I've failed to come back around to reposting it, for which I apologize. But it should be there, I think. And check that out right after this episode, because they connect, right? All my episodes interconnect in weird, interesting ways, and there's no wrong or right way to listen to the show. But and by the way, I just realized I've been at this long enough that I forgot that my first several handful of shows were rather poorly produced, and that there's some bad episodes that sound horrible. And I need to go back and edit those and fix them up so that they sound a little bit better, or completely re-record them. One of the two. But I'm hoping, by bringing this up, that someone might give me a little feedback about what the last several episodes are sounding like. Hopefully better than the first couple, which were, back in the day when I had a completely different set of equipment and a completely different environment to record it. So, ideological outrage is exhausting. Its purpose is part of the, quote, bad guys' agenda. It is a tool of the oppressors. It is a tactic of those that profiteer on the conflict that they create amongst us. The bad guys want us fuming mad and bottling up pent-up aggressions over our ongoing and physically exhausting ideological outrage. Why? Why is that the objective? Well, as I think I've tried to indicate over the last several episodes, they are out to prevent us from healing. They are out to prevent, to block, delay, and or cheat us out of even realizing that we are capable of personal, transformative healing. Now, at first, that may not make a lot of sense. But for those of you who are new, or for those of you who've been listening along and have not caught on to this, forgive me, I'm not being judgmental. I'm just saying, I know that it's easy to sort of like tune things out, especially in 45-minute episodes where I really go in long tangents. It's easy to get sidetracked and then miss chunks of it. So I'm not judging. I'm just saying, in case you missed it, at the center of my multi-theory thesis about what's going on in this environment that we find ourselves in is the notion, not original to my mind or to my thinking, but that's been around a really long time and has gone through different permutations and interpretations, and I'm just trying to bring it to a very simple and organic place. And that's this: the human species is a collective and networked, in other words, interconnected species. We are not lost and alone in our loneliness. Our sense of individuated isolation is illusory at best. It is, arguably, part and parcel of some of the oldest social conditioning around. Part of the oldest brainwashing that we have been oppressed by. Now, what advantage does the system of oppression have in convincing us all perpetually for centuries that we live alone inside our skulls and cannot achieve personal transformative healing? What are they profiting from? How are they profiting from the perpetual distraction of the human species from this internal, organic, birthright, God-given power of personal transformative healing? Well, there's the obvious. We're easier to control. We're easier to keep docile. We're easier to manage and manipulate when we feel isolated, alone, and powerless. When we feel isolated, alone, and powerless, and we are convinced and clinging to the notion that this is just a mundane, inert, boring, materialist, non-magical place, they can profit more. They can profit harder on us, our work, our effort, our suffering, our joys, our willingness to sacrifice ourselves in the face of all reason to defend ideology. They profit from all of that. Now, lots of people who are materialists and or free marketers or globalists and mind you, there's a lot of conflating of what globalism means with a lot of other things that's not necessarily actually globalist, but I digress. I'm not apologizing or carrying water for any ism. Okay? Let's pause here and put a pin in all that right there. The most common blind knee-jerk response that I get on the internet, up there in the top 5 of the most common responses is, oh, you're a paid troll, aren't you? You're some brainwashed, water-carrying, leftist, new age snowflake, and you don't even understand what you're talking about. This has been said to me in a bunch of different ways, a lot, ever since I chose to open the door of revealing my personal, internal investigation and the conclusions and opinions and thoughts I've derived from that very long and patient journey. It's easy to deny or attempt to deny the validity of someone else's statement by saying, no, you're wrong, and then instead of following it up with thoughtful talking points based in fact about why I believe you to be mistaken or incorrect or inaccurate or wrong, instead I'll just call you names and, make threatening intonations about what I might do to you because of the names that I've called you. You're crazy, you're stupid, you're evil, and I'm going to do horrible things to you because of that. That's easy, folks. It's meaningless. Especially behind the anonymity of a screen. Say that to my eyeballs without blinking and without the shield of some object or group of people to make you feel tough. And I'll show you the power of choosing personal, transformative healing. Now, haters gonna hate, and some of them out there are deeply entrenched in their hate. But the power of direct, personal, and exposed communication can be quite unpredictable. We all know what it's like to go from 0 to 60 and suddenly be in a bar brawl, or at least we can all imagine what it's like based on experience and media conditioning. But what is it like to have a deep, thoughtful, meaningful discussion about things we radically disagree about without resulting to pointless, idiotic hate speech, insults, put downs. I'll tell you what it's like. It is transformative and it heals. That's why I call it personal transformative healing. Why do I juxtapose this? And why do I keep trying to call it out? Well, at the personal level, I think it's important to raise awareness about this distinction. At the personal level, it's important to always be striving towards some consensus building that helps heal those who are not yet healed. To heal and to help those that do not understand themselves well enough to know that their behavior is being impacted or influenced or, dare I say, even motivated by unattended trauma, by suffering that they are refusing to acknowledge. Now, this is a sensitive subject, folks. No one likes to be told, hey, you're traumatized. No one likes to be told that they are ineffectively coping with their emotions. No one likes to be called an anger ball. But if you stop and look at the unavoidable and, once you've got clarity, painfully obvious patterns in our society, that's what we're being pushed towards. Intolerance, thoughtlessness, bottling up of negative energies, an addiction towards conflict, an addiction to division instead of collaboration. At the personal level, I have this reminder for everybody. Non-judgmental statement here, folks. It's about comprehending the process, not about being not about me telling you that you're wrong and telling you why you're wrong. This following statement is about facilitating the self-identification of, where we at, where any one of us might be at in this vicious cycle. But the following, I think, is worthy of taking note of, worthy of remembering, and worthy of including in your practice of self-transformation. It's been said before in various ways. I'm just rephrasing it for my own purposes of comprehending it myself in a deeper way, right? But I propose to you that the following is true. When you, or anyone, chooses insults instead of understanding, when you choose hate speech instead of collaboration, when you choose to put someone down instead of lifting them up so that they can in turn help lift you up, when you choose conflict instead of resolution, when you choose hate instead of love, you are revealing more about yourself and your internal trauma and the ways in which you are not coping with that internal trauma than you are revealing or exposing about the person you're attacking. Bullies always think that they're proving some point and exposing some flaw in the individual that they are bullying through their bullying activities. I feel this way because whenever I've asked people, either in real life or on social media, why they chose a bullying tactic, that's the closest thing to a reasonable answer that anyone has ever come up with. Most people knee-jerk respond with more bullying, telling me to fuck off and to not tell them how to live their life and who the fuck am I, radically failing to acknowledge that someone is asking them to consider their actions and evaluate them for themselves and determine whether or not they were, genuinely guilty of the act of bullying. Now, for some people, bullying is part and parcel of growing up. For some people, bullying is not a bad thing, which, boggles the mind until you realize that that's probably because they were raised by bullies. Bullying is a nefarious and quite seductive ego trap that is, it's there, it's everywhere, it's laying in wait to snare us, whether we're walking towards our spiritual path or we're not, whether we're just walking our mundane, worldly path. I often point out that ego traps are everywhere along our journey inwards towards our spiritual experiences, and our, even after we've opened that door, even after we've engaged that deeply, ego is savvy, yo. Ego anticipated that shit. Ego's a couple of steps ahead of everybody. No offense. But there are people that are just as toxic, that are leaders in spiritual circles, as there are toxic leaders in political circles, or in, organized religious circles, or in non-religious anti-political circles. The corruption is everywhere. And the solution is, in my humble opinion, that one thing that has been consistently under attack, consistently marginalized and minimized and belittled from day one. And that's that love and healing and forgiveness can and will facilitate us in solving the problems we've created. Whereas everything else on the opposite end of the spectrum is part and parcel of that collection of tools that we use to create the problems that we've created for ourselves. Does that make sense? I think it astounding that people will literally say, love will never solve anything, it is bullshit. And instead, we must take up arms and kill these motherfuckers and then impose our ideological solution on the world, because this ideological solution is the most righteous. Whatever, insert your favorite ideological solution. Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Voluntarianarians, whatever you call themselves. Voluntarianism. So what would you call voluntarianites? Maybe. Maybe that's it, because, sometimes there's those words you can't end with the same suffix, so you gotta find a new suffix, even though you're trying to suffix the same thing. But I digress. That argument is part of the oppression. I was having a discussion on social media, which I want to make a whole special episode about because it went into great depth and I want to actually read the details from it. But one of the opening gambits was, from the person who engaged me in the conversation, they posted a post about some political detail in this ongoing government shutdown clusterfuck of all clusterfucks. And I countered. There was a lot of discussion going on already in that thread. There was a lot of people spewing hate at the left. There was people spewing hate at the right, etc., etc. And then I was like, hang on a second. How's about we think about or discuss or address some of the actual solutions, because calling each other names and telling each other that your idea is crazy and evil and wrong and my idea is righteous and righteous and righteous and the only solution, I alone can fix it. You don't have to be Trump to think that way. He's just tip of the iceberg. He's just an expression of the symptomology at its worst. So all that thinking there is not healthy. It does not solve problems. It just sets up more layers of conflict. Whereas the thing that they've been ridiculing, mocking, marginalizing, and trying to convince us to abandon, love, forgiveness, radical, personal, transformative healing, those things might very well be the magic that we have been discouraged from accessing. That may very well be the actual solution to all these horrible, horrible problems. And thus, in my mind, it becomes an unavoidable choice that must be made. We must, in the face of the worst emotional trauma, we must, in the face of the most violent verbal violence, we must, in the face of the most aggressive physical violence, we must stand steadfast in our commitment, in our choosing of, and in our manifestation of, in our implementation of unconditional, loving, forgiving, personal, transformative healing. If you're in an argumentative mood, go ahead and take that bold statement I just made and come at me with your best reasons as to why I'm wrong. Go ahead. Convince me. In the meantime, I'll be sitting down to praise and thank the universe for the progress we are making, and I will sit in meditation and in the broadcasting of love and healing energy to you and anyone and everyone willing to receive it. All right, I've been going on for quite a bit. As always, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart so strong that you can do nothing but share that abundance.
And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily Zencast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Seppa. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.
Mana. Mana mana. Mana. Everybody join in. Mana. Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
Hello? Okay, just a second. It's for you. The question is, what is a phenomena?
The question is, who cares?
And that, my friends, is that. But there's some deep things going on over there with that last beat. What is a phenomena? Who cares? That's interesting, isn't it? At any rate, thanks to the Jim Henson Corporation for hopefully never suing me over that not particularly appropriation of that bit of audio. I digress. Like I said, all the materials referenced in my shows are done so with respect, without an intent to infringe anyone's publishing rights, but rather with the wholehearted altruistic purpose of sharing them with the world as part and parcel and package of my wacky show that aims to help people realize that salvation is not coming from out there. It's already deep within. You just got to go in there and cultivate it. Peace out, folks.